Hey friends, we all have been in a situation where when there's a new protocol drops, we want to be the first to analyze the protocol. And so how do you actually start analyzing the protocol? And so I thought I'd make a quick video on what I would do if I were to look into decoding a new protocol. So first, I would go to the docs. So just look up whatever protocol. In this case, I have GMX open up. Just look up GMX docs, and you would find contracts for all the relevant contracts. And then what I would do is I would just roughly read through everything. I wouldn't go into the details just yet, right? Just sort of read through and get an understanding of what are the core contracts that you would need. And then I would try the protocol itself. So right here I have GMX v1, and just try out the protocol, but you do not have to actually go through with the transaction. So in this case, I am doing a swap from ETH to USDC, and confirm the swap. And this is the important bit. In your metamask pop-up, there is actually already the data that you'll be sending to the contract. So essentially this is your function signature, like the first 10 characters, and then the rest is data. But I guess what's important here is this address, right? So this address is the address that you are interacting with when you're doing this swap interaction. And so if you click on this address, you will see a bunch of other functions being called to this address. You can even click on events to see what events are emitted from this address, right? The swap. So it looks like it's the main swap contract, right? And so from this you kind of have several examples of transactions to look at. You can look into this and see, within a swap transaction, what events that occurred and which are the contract addresses you need to pay attention to. You can also go back to transactions and see all the different types, like for example this swap and then swap ETH tokens. Is there a difference between the two? You can dive deeper, and this is how you get sample transaction hashes to look into. Once you've gotten these hashes, you can plug into the event logs table or the decoded event logs table and see what data is available. Now at this point, because you have read the docs, right, roughly, you can then sort of like find I guess similar contracts. So in this case, this address here, 0xABB, seems to be the router contract, right? And so I would then click on the other contracts and see like what events those contracts emit, and then sort of build up my overview understanding of how the protocol works. Now you do not have to understand everything. Just draft out what the main the main things you can do with the contract. Like in this case GMX, you can swap, can provide liquidity to the GLP, and by having these core contracts in mind, then you can build your queries. Or then you can find more contracts, find more example transactions to build queries. Another thing I would say about finding main contracts is learning how to read etherscan. So I have a example transaction here where this user interacts with this contract, and this contract is this is the contract that you would see when you in your metamask pop-up. And if you just look through the traces over here, it says this contract, which is named as Blur.io Marketplace 2, sends some ETH to Seaport 1.4, and then Seaport sends a bunch of ETH to the other contracts, and then again the Marketplace 2 contract sends to Blur Marketplace, and then Blur Marketplace sends out ETH to the following addresses. And so this Marketplace contract, right, Blur.io Marketplace 2, is actually an aggregator contract, right? in this case it's an NFT aggregator. It aggregates sales and it directs the funds to the individual marketplaces like Cpod 1.4 and to Blur, I guess V1 of the marketplace, and the individual marketplaces then will perform this NFT sale and sends the funds to the seller, and also the fees, and to the royalty address, right? Creator address, I guess. And so when you look at etherscan, things to look out for is of course identifying if this address is the actual contract or if it's the aggregator contract. I have another example. I just randomly found this one over here, where you see how it says this address interacts with this 0x26, and then 0x26 sends the funds to OpenSea Wyvern, and then OpenSea Wyvern does the sales, and then the contract in the end sends the remaining ETH back to the original sender. So in this case, you can think of it as it's some sort of like account abstraction type of thing, where the user sends a fund to a contract, and then the contract does all the stuff for them, and then the contract sends the remaining ETH back to the user, right? And so yeah, in this case the main contract wouldn't be this, because assuming you're looking at NFT sales, your main contract would be the OpenSea Wyvern contract, not the 0x26 contract. Last thing I'll say about this is that there are proxy contracts. So proxy contracts are contracts where the contract itself doesn't have the main doesn't have the code for the main functions. It delegates all the functions calls to another contract. So in this case, I have Blur Blend, which is the contract for Blur's NFT lending, right? If you don't know like how do you tell if it's a proxy contract? One way to tell is if you go down to the ABI section, like contract ABI. ABI is just telling you what all the functions and events are in this particular contract, and if you just scan through this contract, well, the first thing you see is that it's very short, right? So there's not many things happening here, and if you just scan through, you will just find things like admin, right? Admin change, beacon upgraded. You will not see the functions itself. Like if it's a blend contract, I'm expecting functions like land the NFT as collateral, right? Or like borrow against it, right? Things like that. But if you look at the ABI, there's nothing about that, right? So that's one of the clues to tell you that this is a proxy contract, and it relies on an implementation contract for its functions. Another way you can verify is to just click on something, let's say buy to borrow, buy to borrow, and then go to, I like this website called app.blocksec.com, and then paste your transaction. This website is really helpful to look at traces. And so what I'm looking for is my blend contract, which is this 0x294, which is this one, 0x294. I'm looking for a delegate call from this address to another address. So in this case, you can see how this address has sent a delegate call to this address called blend, and so essentially this is the proxy contract, which is the address that we just looked at, which has nothing in its ABI. Here, it sends a delegate call to this contract called blend. I'm going to open up etherscan, and we'll take a look at its contract tab, and let's take a look at its ABI. you see how it is way longer than the previous contract. And if you just toggle full screen and just search like, I don't know, auction or something, you will see that it has a bunch of information related to auction, which is what I would expect from a contract that does NFT lending, right? And so that's how you can tell, oh, this is the implementation contract that the initial blend contract uses for. And so in this case, which is your main contract, right? Your main contract is, of course, then the contract that has all this information, because you can then look at what function it has to begin your analysis. Whereas if you look at the initial contract, there's nothing going on, right? And so so that's how you find these sort of contracts. Okay, so now that you've gotten your main contract, what to do next? Let's head over to the data studio. So one thing I would do is, of course, make sure that your contract is verified. If it's verified, we will have its ABI, and we'll be able to see its decoded event logs. So we'll do two things. One is we'll look at event logs, and also we'll look at the decoded traces. So I'm going to go to Ethereum Core event logs, easy event logs. Now, if you don't know what decoded event logs are, it's essentially, let me just pull up a event log, a transaction, let's say borrow over here. And so there's a bunch of logs that are emitted from this transaction, right? And essentially in its raw form, event logs looks like this. The logs looks like this for this event index. And so in its decoded version, you just simply take the ABI and match what event is emitted to the ABI, and so we'll be able to like decode the data, and so the data will come out looking nicely like this. And so that's what we would see in the decoded event logs table. So what I want to do is I want to take the contract address of the event log that I want to see, for example this. Take the address, go back to the data studio, and you can do something like this. Make sure it's in lowercase. In this case it is, but if you want to lower it, just do like this. And then let's do a limit 10 to see. But what I want to do is I want to get an example of all possible events that are emitted from this address. And so I will show you how to do that in a bit. But just to show you what this table has, you can see there's event name, and then these are the decoded data that you would see on etherscan. Right? So what's important here is event name and decoded log. And so we would do exactly that, which is event name, decoded log, and then just for a reference, I want to get the transaction hash and also timestamp. Now, if I run this query, I might get all refinances or all buy locked event names. But I want to get one of each so that I can have a full overview of what events are emitted by this contract. Now, to do that, I would add a qualify. So something like qualify row number, which means create a column called row number. Let me just write this thing out first. So what this does is I'm creating a new column called row number over partition by event name, order by block timestamp ascending, which means every time there is which means arrange every event name, the same event name together, order them by timestamp ascending, like the first occurrence of the event name. And because I qualify them to only have one, that means it will only show me the first instance where an event name like this occurs. So I will only have one example of refinance, one example of buy log, seize, repay, so on and so forth. Another thing you should do, of course, is to add a timestamp filter. So we have to look at when the contract is created. In this case, it's May 1st, 2023. So I'm just gonna add a contract where to look for May 1st, 2023. So we will run this query and see what we get. Now again, the point of doing this is to be able to get every event, and we'll be able to get an example transaction hash for all these for each of the event that is emitted by this contract. I also just now realizing that you should probably include an event index here, just so that you know exactly which event index when you're referring to it on etherscan. Okay, cool. So let's see what events are emitted, right? We have initialize, offer, cancel. All this doesn't seem too important to us. Because it's an FD lending contract, I think what's important would be, auction, refinance, seized, repay, right? Loan offer taken. So we can sort of like see what information is emitted from this event and what is the transaction hash. So we can copy this, paste it on etherscan to just get a comprehensive overview of what's happening in that transaction. And if you feel like the events that are emitted, the information it's not enough, like you're not getting the information you're looking for, that's when you can look into the easy decoded traces table. Now I've went ahead and already did the same thing that I did for event logs, where instead of event name is function name, and I was looking at a balancer contract to see what functions does it call, and so this is what I get, right? I ran this ahead of time because I know it's gonna take some time, since we're looking at since 2021, so there's a lot of data to pass through. But anyway, so let's look at what information we're getting from the decoded traces, right? So in this case, balancer is I guess an AMM, and so you have things like swap and flash loans, and this is the type of information that you can get. And so what I would do is I would first look at event logs, see if the data that it emits is it has the data that I want. If it doesn't have, then I'll look into traces, and you can see the sort of information is, I guess, slightly different but almost the same. Traces would have, most of the time it would have more information, but also a bit harder to query. I feel like there's a lot more things you need to understand, so hence why I would start at the event logs table first before moving on to traces. But yeah, so what's next after this? So now you have all the function names, you have all the event names. Now you can sort of like piece together the puzzle. Like you've tried out the protocol, you have all the docs ready. Now will be the time to go back to the docs, read again, and construct, like plan out your queries, what are the main functions that you want to get metrics on, and then yeah, by then you would have all the information you need to create your queries. I think that's it for the video. Just a quick one sharing my tips on how I would go about looking at new protocols, and that's it. See you next time. Bye.